Good evening and welcome to the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Annual Community Update. I'm Lou Riccoboni, your host for this evening. Over the next hour, you will hear from CNL's President and CEO, Joe McBrady, as well as from some key members of the CNL team. We will provide viewers with a sneak peek into some of our exciting activities across the company and across our various missions, from environmental cleanup to science and technology, and a few other things in between. And we hope to also provide a hint of the exciting times ahead. But we also want to hear from you. At the end of our presentations, we welcome questions from the audience. Please submit them anytime using the chat feature on your screen. So please sit back, relax, and with that, I am pleased to turn it over to Joe.
Great, Lou. Thanks very much, and welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Joe McBrady, and I am the President and CEO here at Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this community update this evening. This is the third year in a row that we have hosted this public webinar, which gives us the opportunity to speak to you directly about all the work that we are doing and to hear your questions, your comments, and your feedback. So far, we have been really pleased with the turnout and the engagement at these events, and we hope that you will continue to participate and take advantage of these sessions. So again, thank you very much for being here tonight. Before I begin, though, I want to acknowledge that our operations are situated on the traditional lands and territories of Indigenous peoples across Canada. CNL is committed to engaging with Indigenous peoples through open-ended conversations and establishing meaningful relationships built on trust and built on transparency. Our approach to engaging with Indigenous peoples is centered around listening, understanding, learning, and taking meaningful actions to help advance reconciliation with Indigenous communities on the lands on which we operate. So there's obviously a lot of exciting news that we want to talk to you all about this evening. But before we get into that, I want to start by sharing some important organizational changes that are taking place here at Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. First, I will be completing my term as President and CEO next month. While I'm excited to return to my home in Tennessee, I have to say that I will truly miss my experience here in Canada and at CNL, which I have to say has been one of the highlights and frankly, the epitome of my career. But I'm leaving the organization in really good hands, and I'm pleased to announce that Jack Craig will be taking over as the incoming President and CEO. Jack is a seasoned nuclear industry veteran with extensive knowledge of our operations as a former chairman of the board of directors of CNEA, our parent organization. Jack is actually joining us here today, and I'm pleased to give him the opportunity now to say a few words. So Jack, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Really glad to be here tonight and excited for the opportunity. As Joe said, I do have some experience here at CNL over the last 5 years working with Joe and the team. I'm really in the second day of my roughly 30-day transition with Joe. Really looking forward to meeting the staff and the organization. I'm also really fortunate to be here tonight on the same day you're having this community update, because really throughout my career, I've always valued the opportunity to speak to the community, to involve the community. Participation is really important, and also the feedback is really important, because I do believe that feedback and participation leads to better decision making. So I look forward to working with the community and the staff here at CNL on the important CNL missions. And lastly, I do want to thank Joe for his last 5 years. I've known Joe for quite a while. He's done a great job here, not only in executing the mission safely over the last 5 years, but really transitioning the site to a really bright future and also a great asset for Canada. So back to you, Joe.
Great, Jack. Thanks very much, and thanks for those comments. And in addition to Jack's appointment, I have some other leadership changes that I'm going to announce tonight. First is Ms. Jan Preston will be joining CNL as our new Chief Operating Officer, and she will be replacing Mr. Peter Stalker, who has been here for just over 2 years. Steve Bushby, who many of you may remember, has been at AECL for quite a while. Steve will be replacing Dr. Jeff Griffin as our Vice President of Science and Technology. Next, Ms. Janet Tosh will be replacing Mr. Todd Cook as their Vice President of Human Resources. And finally, Mr. Mark Blair has replaced Kerry Rod as the General Manager of the White Shell site, whilst Mr. Scott Cameron has taken over for Mark Huey as a General Manager in charge of the Port Hope Area Initiative. With all that said, I want to wish Peter, Jeff, Todd, Kerry, and Mark all the best. I want to thank them for their leadership and their outstanding accomplishments while they've been here at CNL. And we look forward to a new era at CNL under Jack's leadership, supported by Jan, Steve, Janet, Mark, and Scott, and the remainder of our executive team. So, as I said, we've hosted this webinar for a few years now, and it gives us another medium to talk directly to the local communities and to the general public about the work that we do to restore and to protect the environment, to develop clean energy technologies for today and tomorrow, and to contribute to the health and well-beings of all Canadians. But this webinar comes at a particularly exciting time, not just for CNL, but for the entire nuclear industry in Canada. Take, for example, the province of Ontario, which has recently announced the pursuit of a series of new small modular reactors at the Darlington site, the construction of a new fleet of reactors potentially at the Bruce site, and the refurbishment of the Pickering Nuclear Operating Station. And also in Saskatchewan, where funding has been committed in order to finance the construction of the province's first microreactor, paving the way for nuclear energy deployment in the prairies for the first time. There is similar momentum in Alberta and the other provinces, and we've also seen national support from the federal government with millions of dollars in funding commitments made just last month towards new nuclear power in Canada. And this is the backdrop against which CNL launched our own corporate strategy known as Vision 2030 a couple of years ago. And that vision is guiding the revitalization of the Chalk River Laboratory campus, the development of new research and development projects, the cleanup of historic nuclear waste at sites across Canada, and the modernization of our workforce practices and our workforce policies. In pursuit of all of these incredibly important missions, I want to briefly draw your attention to this photo that a CNL employee recently shared with me. As I prepare to move on from CNL, this photo really struck a chord with me because I think it captures the transformation of the Chalk River Laboratory site skyline that we have been working so hard to realize since 2016. Since then, we have nearly 120 buildings have been safely demolished and decommissioned here at the site. In their place, CNL has constructed a new science collaboration center, a new industrial use support facility, a new site entrance building, hydrogen laboratory, new materials research laboratory, and a new tritium laboratory with more on the way. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those construction projects during this presentation. This is in addition to major investments that we have made into infrastructure improvements for the site, including new domestic water and natural gas service, a modern sanitary sewage treatment facility, and a system to more effectively manage stormwater. This transformation gives us at CNL the tools to support all of those exciting nuclear projects across Canada that I just spoke about. But it also enables us to do so much more. And that is reflected in our science projects and our programs, which continue to grow day in and day out. Whether it is research to support nuclear energy, hydrogen, tritium, fusion, whether it's advanced fuels, synthetic fuels, hydrogen, health sciences, or the development of new medical isotopes, we at CNL are working in concert with other organizations to help advance innovative products and services toward real-world use. And of course, the growth of our programs have very real and very immediate benefits for our local communities. Over the past 5 years, I'm proud to share that CNL's S&T team has increased by over 100 people each and every year, and that CNL as an organization now employs over 4,000 people. This means more jobs, more money circulating in our communities, and more growth in our local economies. They say a picture says 1,000 words. In the case of this remarkable photo, I think it tells a very powerful story about just how far we have come over these past few years. And it is all thanks to the hard work of our staff. I could go on, but we really want to concentrate on some of these presentations we're going to give you here in just a few minutes, and we want to hear from you. but I want to make sure I leave plenty of time to answer all of your questions. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. And Lou, I will now turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I now have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Monica Steedman, our Vice President of Environmental Remediation Management. Monica, over to you.
Thanks, Lou. CNL is responsible for the safe cleanup of the AECL-owned sites and the Port Hope Area Initiative. CNL is a national leader in environmental remediation and waste management practices. Joe mentioned the nearly 120 buildings that we've taken down at the Chalk River facility. We are also responsible for the cleanup at Whiteshell, Douglas Point, Gentil 1, NPD. But tonight, we really want to showcase the diverse and extensive cleanup of the historic waste in the Port Hope Area Initiative. To take you through that, please let me introduce and hand over to Scott Cameron. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. The origin of the Port Hope Area Initiative core waste goes back to the 1930s. Radium and uranium was mined in the Northwest Territories, then shipped down to Eldorado Company, who refined the ore in Port Hope. This waste generated was disposed of at Port Granby and many areas within Port Hope, and at the time, this waste was not seen as an issue. Next slide. One of our first major projects was the Port Granby long-term waste storage facility, which has now entered into its long-term monitoring phase. The main picture here is Port Granby as the site now stands, a blank slate, future use, and demonstrates CNL's expertise to safely and successfully complete complex environmental projects. Next slide. The Port Hope scope has multiple major sites, including private properties. For all of our major projects shown here, we have safely removed the bulk of the waste and transferred it to our Port Hope long-term waste facility. In some cases, that included industrial waste for a cleaner future for generations to come. Next slide. The second part of our mission is private property remediation across Port Hope. With several major projects heading into the final stages and private property remediation ramping up, we are ready for a busy 2024 construction season in our community. Next slide. Lastly, the low-level radioactive waste cleanup in the Port Hope area is being safely transferred to a long-term waste management facility currently operating in the municipality near Port Hope and the 401. This facility's design and concept is very similar to the design of the now closed Port Hope Granby. Will safely conceal the waste for hundreds of years and will go into a monitoring program. The end result is safety for the community, the public, and long-term environment protection. Thank you. Back to you, Lou.
Thank you very much, Monica and Scott. I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Stephen Bushby, our new Vice President of Science and Technology. Dr. Bushby.
Thanks so much, Lou. First, I wanted to just echo some of Joe's comments and give a big thank you to Jeff Griffin, the outgoing VP. He's done an amazing job and has certainly left some big shoes to fill. And this first slide, and we're obviously very proud of this building, and so you're going to see it a few times today. But this building was being built when I actually was leaving the site the first time, and when I came back in here, I looked out that window that goes out and looks over the site. And it was just astonishing to me. I was just struck by the history of this place. Next slide, please. So this is the view. This is, you can actually see the Science Collaboration Center down in the front. But when you take a look out here, you see NRU, you see NRX, life-saving isotopes that have undoubtedly touched everyone on this call, either directly or a family member. But this is where it all began. It was the genesis of the CANDO fleet that operate safely in a number of countries in the world. And indeed, much of the foundational science that makes up part of nuclear was actually done here. Now, we've been telling this story for a long time. I mean, we are proud of our history. We are proud of those things. We had Nobel Prizes and all the rest of it. But I got to tell you, when I looked out the window this time, it wasn't just about where we've been, but it's about where we're going. right? These old buildings are getting knocked down, the new facilities that Joe talked about, the 800 people in the S&T organization, and how quickly it's growing. And our lab works collaboratively with the private sector and with academia to address these new exciting opportunities in front of us. It is truly something to behold, the things that we're doing at this laboratory. Next slide, please. Yeah, I can go to the next slide. Thanks. So I think, many folks have seen this slide before, but truly what you have here is you have a jewel in this country, and you have a national lab that is focused on national priorities. So today I'm going to give you a high-level overview on just some of the amazing work that's happening in the clean energy space. There's all kinds of things that are happening in, with the health of Canadians and things associated with isotopes, but focus is really just going to be on the clean energy side. And I'm going to go quickly. I've got a lot of slides, and it's kind of against what I usually do, but I'm excited about this stuff, and I want to kind of whet your appetite. So we're in the middle of those worldwide energy transformation to greenhouse gas free emissions. And so the first question you have to ask is, so what's happening in the world? Well, I think all of us who are on this call recognize that nothing like this has ever happened before in the growth of nuclear, not in most of our lives anyway. And it's well known that nuclear power provides safe, reliable baseload power to the grid without emissions. And the importance of nuclear power is now being recognized much more broadly. And I laughed with my kids and I said, we're taking the rightful place as one of the cool kids again. Next slide, please. Joe talked about this, so I won't spend much time, but this is indeed what's happening in Canada right now. It's not just Ontario that's when it's going to double its generating capacity from over 40,000 megawatts to over 80,000, and half of that is going to be nuclear. But these other provinces that have historically been non-nuclear provinces are actually signing MOUs to work together. But it's great that we're doing these things. But I think an important consideration of all of this is that climate change is not just a Canadian issue. It's a global externality. And global, the numbers are a little staggering, is that the International Energy Agency in 2022 did a review and an analysis. And they said there's roughly about 450 reactors that in operation today, and they produce about 400 gigawatts of electricity. Well, in one of the previous COP meetings that existed, where countries got together and said what their emission targets are, there was a net zero emission targets for 2050. In order to meet that, the amount of nuclear production in the world is going to have to double by 2050. Last year at the United Arab Emirates, we saw that the COP28 meeting is that 22 countries committed to tripling their nuclear power by 2050. It's important to remember that this is incremental. It's not just new, right? Long-term operations of current nuclear assets is going to be absolutely critical. The average age of a nuclear plant in the world right now is 35 years old. So that means by 2040, the number is going to decline to around 30% of that. After I left AECL, I joined an investment firm. And, one of the reasons that you've got private equity and things like that are coming into looking at nuclear power, because the expected investment in nuclear power is going to be $100 billion US annually, or more than $2 trillion over the next 25 years. So this is about governments, but it's all kinds of people that are going to have to be investing into a clean energy transformation. So all this is great at setting the stage, but how's the lab responding? Next slide, please. And when I talk about long-term operations, I think anyone who has been at this lab, either directly or indirectly, has been involved in keeping the current CANDU fleet operating. Our scientist understands what's going on at the microscopic level. We do corrosion experiments to ensure that the reactors run safely. We do materials experiments. We know how these components operate in the middle of the reactor. We're actually able to take pieces from the middle of the reactor and do those assessments. And then the great video beforehand, before this started, you could see some of the work that's going on all of this. And when it comes to actually refurbish a plant, we have the tooling and the techniques to actually remove these components from the reactor, the pressure tubes, the calandria tubes, to make sure that these can be removed safely and then put back into operation. And as Darlington and Bruce Power are completing their efforts and, Pickering on the horizon, the lab is absolutely positioned and ready to work with our utility counterparts to make sure that the CANDU stations here continue to provide clean baseload electricity for decades to come. Next slide, please. There was a very exciting announcement earlier this year. There was an MOU between AECL and Atkins to develop a new generation of CANDU called the Monarch. Now, the Monarch is based on mature CANDU technology, but the labs will certainly be central to ensuring that the scientific backing for the safety and licensing, the testing of new components, et cetera, so that this reactor can become a reality, is the labs are going to have to be underpinning all of the work that's going to be needed as required there. So there's a direct opportunity for our organizations, for CNL, AECL, and Atkins to work collaboratively together to develop, again, our own domestic technology that can fill the need for power in this province and indeed worldwide. Next slide, please. So small modular reactors. I think we've talked to you about small modular reactors before. So grid scale reactors are typically large. They're based on economies of scale. They're 1,000 megawatts or more. Small modular reactors are different. They're based on economies of series. So you build many reactors. They're small, and you can basically there's all kinds of small reactors that are out there, different types, and their grid scales down to the micro scale. And so the idea here is that you build many reactors and you can install them repeatably and quickly. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in small modular reactors over the last number of years, and our laboratory has significant investments, significant expertise that goes into furthering the initiatives around SMRs or advanced reactors. We do work with our federal colleagues. We do work with industry to help them and build using our expertise in our facilities. We have a siting process by which we have a licensed site here. We allow a proponent to come in and take a look and see how they could demonstrate their technology. It's to get them ahead to deal with those first of a kind issues that everyone has to look at when you're looking at new reactor technology. Next slide, please. And indeed, this is an artist rendering of something that we call CEDAR, which is the Clean Energy Demonstration Innovation. And really what this is that how could you take one of these small modular reactors, which produce, there's, like I say, many different types of them, but there's the electricity that comes from, there's the heat, and how would you actually tie those into other clean energy sources? How would you potentially use that heat in industrial processes or in mining processes? So it really is something exciting. And, we're looking at how could we do something like that here at the laboratory. But of course, developing the technologies, the tools, we can maybe help a small community or an industrial complex utilize something like a CEDAR. Next slide, please. For years, we've been hearing about hydrogen and the hydrogen economy, and there's a lot of interest in it. And I think more than ever before, there's a real opportunity as we go forward, because nuclear can play an absolute key role as we go forward in the production of hydrogen. And our laboratory is absolutely positioned to play a significant role in any type of hydrogen economy that's going to emerge. I mean, I think the way that I like to describe it is that hydrogen expands the reach of clean nuclear power. And in emerging countries or countries that don't have nuclear technology, hydrogen that's produced by nuclear power in another nation can actually be used in the transportation to that new country. It can also be used as a means of energy storage and production. And we have work that's ongoing here at the labs to answer those sorts of questions. So it won't be just simply in our own energy networks in the country, but it can indeed be done worldwide. And a key question that is asked is how can you actually deal with these hydrogen technologies safely? And as Joe mentioned, we have established a Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center that will ensure that everything that we do here and indeed can be transferred to any places that as the hydrogen economy emerges. Next slide, please. The last thing I'm going to talk about today is fusion. Fusion has the potential to provide emissions-free energy with minimal carbon emissions, with minimal or no radioactive waste. So it has been this thing that has been actually pursued for decades. And there's many of you have probably heard of something that's called ITER, which is this multinational experiment underway in France right now. It's a multi-billion-dollar exercise that's going to be decades in the building. But worldwide, the promise of fusion, there are many smaller scale fusion experiments that are underway, well over 100. And again, the numbers are staggering, right? There's over 40 private fusion companies, and they've raised over $8 billion in equity. And that value is growing. And in fact, there's more private money being invested in fusion than there is in fission initiatives. So in SMRs and that type of thing. Canada hasn't really been involved in fusion. But our laboratory is changing that. We're currently examining how can we actually collaborate, not just with these fusion developers, but also to be a partner and providing the fuel to any one of these fuel projects or these fusion projects that can be successful. Next slide, please. So what I want to leave you with is that these are absolutely exciting times, and your national lab is absolutely at the heart of it. We should be proud of it. This is a real jewel. There are wonderful people working here, and we are poised to be back at the center. And I'm really honored to be back. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bushby. Very exciting times ahead indeed. I now have the pleasure of introducing Brian Savage, our Vice President of Capital Projects. Brian, over to you, please.
Thanks, Lou. Good evening. Capital projects are part of a $1.3 billion investment by the Government of Canada for the revitalization of the Chalk River site. This evening, I'm going to provide some highlights of just a few of our accomplishments in capital projects. Next slide, please. It was a really big day in early September, just after Labor Day, with the opening ceremony for the Science Collaboration Center. We see photographs of the Science Collaboration Center a lot, including in this presentation, and it's no surprise really, the architecture is absolutely stunning. This is a 6-story office complex made of mass timber and glass that was constructed under an integrated project delivery model. And it's the third or the last of 3 facilities built under such a model. More than 400 people will work here, and as its name implies, it was designed with collaboration in mind. As per the photo at the left, lower left, it is designed with open concepts and has more than 44 conference and meeting rooms for teams, partners, and clients to collaborate. Next slide, please. Construction on the Advanced Nuclear Materials Research Center, or ANMRC for short, is well underway. ANMRC will be a state-of-the-art nuclear research facility that will be completed in 2028. It will expand our research into clean energy, radioactive materials, reactor fuels, and nuclear medicine. From the drone shot to the right, you can see it's quite a large facility. By all accounts, it's about twice the size of a typical Canadian Tire store, just to put it in perspective for you. And the recent mild winter has been a real bonus for capital projects, as we were able to progress very well on concrete on the right-hand side of the photo. On the left-hand side, you'll see hot cells that are being manufactured off-site in Cambridge, Ontario, and they will be shipped to site sometime in the next year to be installed on the left-hand side of the construction photo on the left. We can't wait till 2028, and we're really happy about where we are with the ANMRC project right now. Next slide, please. Joe mentioned this a little bit in his presentation. He talked about infrastructure improvements and several infrastructure projects. We do more than just build facilities and capital projects. We have to support the massive infrastructure we also have at the Chalk River site. And here, I'm just going to give you a snapshot of just a few of the many projects we have to support infrastructure here at Chalk River. At any one time, we have anywhere from 40 to 50 infrastructure projects going at various stages. And going clockwise from left, we have water services upgrades and repairs. In the center, we have renovations to many of our important laboratories. To the right, yes, we have lots of roads here at Chalk River. This is a snapshot of guardrail work we had going last fall when we replaced several kilometers of guardrail. Down below, mobile unit substation in support of our vast electrical distribution network here on site. In the center, a brand new generator control system for our powerhouse. And lastly, for one of our many laboratories, new air handling units. So that's just a snapshot of what we do here at Capital Projects and some of our recent accomplishments. Back to you, Lou.
Thank you very much, Brian. We will now turn it back to Joe McBrady for some closing remarks. Really appreciate it. Joe.
Lou, thanks very much, and I want to thank all the members of my team who presented this evening. Really, there's an awful lot going on here at Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, and especially here at Chalk River. But we did want to highlight these particular areas because we haven't talked about some of them in detail in the past at this community updated, in particular Port Hope. And Port Hope, I just want to mention a little bit, has made significant progress over the last couple of years. And remember, we are actually cleaning up an operating town with people living in it, going to school, playing hockey, all 9 yards, and we're not interrupting and disturbing their ability to do that. So that in itself is just a huge win. But I just want to tell you that's it from us. And now we would like to hear from you guys. If you have any questions for us, you can type them into the screen and submit them that way. Philip Compass, our Director of Corporate Communications, will moderate the question and answer session for us. So I will turn the microphone over to him. Philip, over to you, bud.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us. And yes, as Joe indicated, we encourage you to put in your questions through the chat function on your screen. The first question that we're going to take is going to go over to Monica Steedman. And Monica, the individual is writing in from Whiteshell, and they're asking about the stand down from last year and how we've responded, actions we've taken since then. So Monica, over to you.
Thanks, Philip. Okay, so first for context, we stood down Whiteshell from operations to address compliance issues with Emergency and Fire Protection Program. To address that, we've put in place a corrective action plan and a multi-phase restart plan to ensure that we stand up work that is commensurate with the completion of those corrective actions. So with that, we have currently moved through a number of phases. We have returned all staff to site, and also commenced our corrective and preventative maintenance action plan, and also commenced low-risk construction activities. What we are seeking to do next is to commence all conventional construction activities in line with the start of the construction season in Manitoba, followed shortly thereafter by a full return to nuclear operations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Monica. Appreciate the update. The next question is going to go, we'll put it to Stephen Bushby from the S&T side of the house. And the individual is asking, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Now they're asking about the Bruce site and the technology that has or has not been chosen for the Bruce site. Now I realize this is not ours to respond to directly, but Steve, maybe a comment about a diversity of technologies and how CNL might fit into a landscape with CANDU and more. So Steve?
Great, thanks, Philip. No, I think it's like you said, I think it's probably best for Bruce to respond directly to that. But I know they are looking at a number of different technologies at the laboratory. Even though that we were based on CANDU, like everything that is here, and there certainly is this exciting new opportunity associated with the Monarch. But as I mentioned to you, or mentioned in the presentation, right, that what's going to be required worldwide for new nuclear, what's going to be required worldwide for making sure that existing nuclear assets worldwide are going to operate. The expertise and the technologies that we have here are absolutely going to be key to those. We can consider any of those independent of whether it's a CANDU or a different type of reactor.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that update. We have a couple of questions on the hydrogen side of the house as well. I know that we have Jan Castillo waiting in the wings. He wasn't a primary presenter, but I know that he leads our hydrogen program. So Jan, this question I'll send over your way. Jan, can you talk a bit about the role that CNL will be playing in Canada's hydrogen strategy? Maybe a bit of background on the strategy itself too. Jan?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure being here. And of course, this is a very relevant question these days. So obviously, hydrogen is a very important transformational opportunity for Canada. As Steve indicated, it really expands the energy outreach of nuclear and provides an opportunity for decarbonization across the country. Canada is very strongly poised to support the hydrogen transition in nationally and internationally. Now, the role that CNL can play into this puzzle is in two areas. One, supporting technology development through new innovative opportunities, utilizing heat and electricity of nuclear for producing hydrogen in a cost-effective way using high-temperature electrolyzers or using thermochemical cycles. Another area of technology development is in hydrogen storage. We have a lot of expertise when it comes down to materials, and we really understand how we can store large amounts of hydrogen in the ground or in tanks or in other areas. The second role that we can play is definitely in the development and the enabling opportunities of codes and standards, which are fundamental building block for the hydrogen transition. We've been working very closely with all organizations in Canada, leading to the establishment of the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center, which is essentially a platform where solutions can be provided, connecting the industry with all the capabilities in the country, going from the west to the east coast to be a convener as a national lab that this organization is. A couple of examples of how we've been supporting the codes development in the country is CNL has probably one of the best expert teams when it comes down to hydrogen risk assessments, as well as hydrogen interaction with materials. And we're working very closely with Transport Canada to support codes and developments of hydrogen in mines, as well as hydrogen in trains. So with that, let me pass it back to you, Phil.
Thank you, Jan. You're not off the hook quite that easily. There is a follow-up question which is asking, is there a physical location for the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center?
Yeah, the physical location is intended to be headquartered in right here in Chalk River, but we are exploring how this could be a national platform with opportunities for other locations in Eastern Canada as well as Western Canada, but it's intended to also be sort of a platform where it's not just the physical asset, but also the ability to link capabilities with other laboratories, whether it's NRC, Alberta in Western Canada, or Quebec with some organizations such as UQTR. So the intent is to be really a network of connections.
Okay, thank you for that, Jan. The next question is coming to Joe McBrady. Joe, I'll paraphrase again, but the question is really looking for maybe a challenge, perhaps, or how would you respond? What are some of the highlights of the GOCO model since the contract was put into place?
So I think I could probably go on and on for a while on what the highlights are that we've been able to accomplish. But I would go back to a bit of the picture that we talked about very early on, and Dr. Bushby centered on. What we've been able to do here from the GOCO model is, I think, bring some fresh ideas and really bring revitalization and the ability to help the site transform into the 21st century. This has been a pivotal time when we look at the changing of our energy structure, of our energy sources and resourcing across the world, whether it's due to climate change, whether it's due to energy security. The ability, I think, of the GOCO model to react and pivot fairly quickly has been key. transforming the laboratory and shifting the mission from isotope production, which we had done extremely well for almost 70 years until the decision was made to shut down the NRU, and then setting the laboratory not only up to do new missions, whether it's environmental remediation, getting into hydrogen technologies or SMRs, or advancing a different type of radiopharmaceutical. I mean, that has been a huge challenge, but I would also tell you, it's been incredibly rewarding. For me, when I look at the capabilities of our staff, supported by the local communities, to be able to turn really on a dime, if you think about timescales and shifting priorities and shifting ability to attack different problems, we've been able to do that. Sure, there have been challenges. There will always be challenges. There's never going to be something that's straightforward, especially when you're going through a large transformational time period. But when I look at, and I'm going to answer the question a little bit the way I want to answer it, Philip. So I hope that's okay. I'll take a lesson from some of my political colleagues. What has amazed me in the time period that I have been here is not only the resiliency of our staff, but their creativity, their ability to do what I've asked them to do. We've had many challenges, and when you think of changing your mission in a very short period of time, changing what people are doing, getting them enthusiastic to do that, and really being able to put the laboratory back on the map in a very solid position across the country. And let's just be honest, our environmental cleanup mission is the largest in Canada. It really is. It's complex. I talked a little bit about the complexity in Port Hope, but we also look at Whiteshell, Douglas Point, Gentil, here at Chalk River, the entire Northwest transportation route going up to Northwest Territories. We span the entire country, and what our folks have been able to do is nothing short of remarkable. I come from a history in the U.S. National Laboratory System, while overseeing 10 national laboratories, and I'll tell you, I've never seen any of them be able to respond, turn on a dime like this group of people has. And so when I look at the future, and you can say whether it's GoCo or not GoCo, it doesn't really matter to me. When I look at the spirit, the dedication, and the enthusiasm of our people, I think the future is really bright. I've gone through multiple renaissance, or short cycled renaissances in the nuclear field before. I think this one's going to stick. I think we are right in the middle of it, from clean energy, from radioisotopes, and from our cleanup world. We are concentrating on what I think is really important to the Canadian people. So I apologize for hijacking the question a little bit, but I do think it was important for the community to understand what our people do across Canada and how hard they are working.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Joe. And I would mention to the folks that are tuned in online, a lot of this presentation doesn't highlight the great progress that's been made in our environmental missions. Our previous update last year was more focused on some of that. There's lots of information online, or if you have specific questions, please send them in. I don't want to downplay the great work that's been done on that mission. And relating to that, the next question is going to Monica. And Monica, not surprising, a lot of public interest on this particular file, but the individual is asking about what's the latest on the NSDF project and public engagement.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me see. So just again, a bit of a recap for those who are unaware. So we've been through the NSDF hearing process, and the CNSC gave its decision on that file in January. So just a bit of history catch up there. As far as and awarded CNL the license to construct in that decision. So we are moving forward with the construction of the NSDF. and looking to, first of all, make sure that we meet all of our pre-construction commitments to our various Indigenous communities and organisations, and also with regards to EIS commitments as we move forward that. So we are currently working through those pre-construction activities to ensure that we've got readiness before commencing the project execution work.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let's change topics just a short bit. We'll look back towards the science and technology mission. And this question is coming over to Mr. Ali Siddiqui. And Ali leads a lot of our advanced reactor work. And the individual is asking about a potential connection between small modular reactors and their use for hydrogen production, or maybe I'll expand it, there are other applications outside of energy. Ali?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. Absolutely, new nuclear in general is a excellent way to make large amounts of hydrogen to support the emerging hydrogen economy. In many cases, these technologies that we're developing at a laboratory scale can be scaled up to prototype scale to demonstrate. In fact, the Cedar Park that Steve spoke about is a great opportunity to leverage the site that we have here, the SMR that we will be seeing built at the site, with a new technology like large-scale hydrogen production at that prototype scale. So all are really realistic options to see proven out in demonstration form and then scaled up further.
Okay, thank you, Ali. While I've got you on the screen, I'm not letting you off the hook quite that easy. There's a question that I admittedly don't understand the nuances of. The individual is asking about a breeder reactor. Has Canada looked at one of those? How could they fit into this new nuclear landscape? Is that something that could burn up the waste? I don't understand it exactly, but Ali, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, great question. Certainly looking out into the future, new nuclear may start with small modular reactors or even conventional large reactors, but looking out further at generation 4 reactors, many of them incorporate fast spectrum or the opportunity to breed their own fuel, to be able to burn what would otherwise be waste from other reactors. That is certainly an area that we're interested in and on a purely laboratory research scale at this phase. CNL, on behalf of Canada, participates in a number of global collaborations, including the Generation 4 International Forum, where we're quite active on 3 different systems. Right now, several SMR vendors are looking at technologies that are similar to breeder reactors, although their first units, they would be aiming to just use existing fuel cycles. But it's certainly an active area of research that we expect in 20 years or 50 years will be much more important than today.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ali. The next question, I'm gonna point towards Dr. Stephen Bushby, but it might be shared with others. It might be one that comes to Joe after the fact. So, Steve, the question is asking, or I'll say is challenging CNL. They're challenging, if you use the same old tools, you'll get the same results. So, what are we doing to be the newest and the best? Well, how are we incorporating innovation into our culture or the way we work? So, Steve, response to that one, or share it?
Sure. I mean, let me take a kick at this. I think actually, the amount of innovation that goes on here is incredible. I mean, starting out with, what and as a foundational piece, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, that's what but I mean, when you're looking at how do you put on new coatings, how do you deal with new fuel types, how are you actually setting, new set points when it comes to safety conditions? All of those sorts of things are building on existing tools, but it doesn't mean that there's any absence of innovation as you're moving forward. I guess the other component that I would add to that is that, I think more so than in the past, we're not doing this alone. We are working with others. We're working with, industry. We're working with academia to actually just sort of strengthen or bolster the sorts of things that we're innovating on. I don't know, maybe if Jeff or somebody else wants to comment on some specifics, then.
Okay, thank you for that response, Steve. Appreciate that one.
So, Philip, can you let me take a stab at that as well?
Absolutely.
So I think it's certainly important that we're looking at the new technologies. One of the things that is the most creative and innovative thing out there is the human mind. And for us, over the last couple of years, we have established multiple very strategic relationships with, I think it's 8 Canadian universities. It might be 7. I just can't remember that. We keep adding one every month or so. So that we can work closely with those universities to be able to create really pipelines of students, the creativity and frankly, the brain power. When I look at the young people who are coming into the market today, they think differently than we do at my advanced age. They are much more creative. They are experimenters, and they're not afraid to try things. And I think it's really important that we look at that from an innovative standpoint. You know, in our ERM program, our environmental remediation program, we use high-tech digital twin type tools. We use robots to minimize the exposure or potential contamination when we're working in some of these high hazard environments. You know, the use of AI and machine learning is very important to what we do across the board. But we have to be careful when we use this to make sure that we have the right, you know, cyber security type protections in place. But for me, you know, it's making sure we get the right people, the right talent who are enthusiastic. And I will have to say, over the last few years that I've been here, when I look at the excitement of people coming into this arena, it's very infectious. And I think we're really sitting in a good place. The STEM programs that are existing in early education and into the universities are really generating a lot of good folks. So Philip, I'll turn that back over to you, because I know you probably still have a couple questions, and we're going to wrap up here shortly.
Yeah, the questions continue to come in, a couple right off the top. So the session is being recorded. We'll have that posted in the next couple of days, so bear with us. If you've asked a question and provided your email with it when you registered, we'll do our very best to follow up and get you a response if we don't have an opportunity to get to your question while we're here. I'm going to send one more over to Steve, and then we'll follow up with a question or two for Monica as well. Steve Bushby, the question is, with all of these grand plans for new reactors, is there enough heavy water to go around?
Oh, I think, thank you for the question. One of the things that we are looking at on the site is how do we actually increase the amount of heavy water by either cleaning up some of the heavy water that's currently existing, but also other ways of actually producing it. So it is something that is going to have to be key as if we're able to expand the number of CANDU plants.
Okay, easy enough. Thank you for that, Steve. The next question is coming to Monica Steedman. Monica, the individual is asking for an update. What's happening at NPD? And maybe a little bit of context for those listening online. Monica?
Certainly. So at NPD, which is shortly up the road from our Chalk River facility, we are in the process of developing an environmental impact statement with regards to that reactor being put into in situ disposal there. We have a number of technical challenges from various federal and provincial agencies that we are continuing to work through. So to make the scientific case for that approach, as well as ensuring that we are having good, meaningful engagement with our various Indigenous First Nations and communities to ensure that we are addressing their concerns and issues that are being raised. That
okay.
Concludes.
Okay, thank you, Monica. And one more is coming your direction. The individual is asking about the movement of wastes from the Whiteshell site to the Chalk River site. I do know we have Megan Vickard online as well if we need to call on Megan in that file, but we'll start with you, Monica.
Certainly. So again, to address this is part of our integrated waste strategy, which looks at the consolidation of fuel from across our various sites into the Chalk River facility. So we're looking to have that program bring fuel from Whiteshell and Gentil One, and potentially Douglas Point to Chalk River over the number of years, to consolidate it here so that it is in the best position for CNL to manage that fuel before it ultimately goes for disposal to the facility that NWMO, so National Waste Management Organization, will be building to take all fuel from Canada. Megan, online, if she wants to add to that.
No, I think you've certainly covered everything. I just would add that CNL has a history of successfully and safely transporting radioactive material according to the transportation regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we do have time for one more question, and then we'll move to closing remarks, and it's going to come back to Steve Bushby. So Steve, and again, perhaps shared, the individual is asking, is there any cooperation as some of these new to nuclear provinces come online, or as they build their nuclear program? A comment there, Steve?
Oh, there is, I'll let Ali Siddiqui answer. He's a little closer to this, but certainly there is collaboration and cooperation that is going on in terms of New Brunswick, and there are memoranda of understanding that exists that CNL has signed with various research institutions in those other locations. But Ali, perhaps you want to expand?
Sure, happy to elaborate a little bit. There's certainly active collaboration underway across the 4 different provinces that have expressed interest in nuclear energy. That's New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, who all signed on to an MOU and released a strategy document about 2 years ago. In addition to that political level and provincial level of cooperation, each of those provinces has entities, including utilities and CNL, as well as other groups such as the CANDU Owners Group and the Canadian Nuclear Association, who meet regularly to coordinate and share knowledge and expertise and take a very pan-Canadian approach to the development of new projects. Eventually, when those projects move along, the utilities themselves will manage the details, of course, but there's a very transparent and open sharing happening in the Canadian ecosystem around new nuclear, in particular around small modular reactors.
Excellent. A very positive note as we draw to the close. Thank you very much, Ali. And just to bring the Q&A section to a close, I turn it back over to Lou Riccoboni for any closeout. Lou?
Thank you, Philip. This concludes our annual community update. I thank Joe McBrady, all the presenters, and our colleagues that help answer your questions. As Philip mentioned, please include your email with the questions that we didn't get to, and we'll be certain to provide a response in due course. With that, I'm Lou Riccoboni, your host. Thank you for watching, and have a good evening.